In 2011, restorers at the Prado Museum in Madrid began preparing a modest, unremarkable painting for an upcoming exhibition. For as long as anyone could remember, it had been catalogued as just another copy of the Mona Lisa, one of dozens scattered across collections in Europe, none of them considered particularly important. The background was almost entirely black. The woman's expression looked stiffer and less alive than the world-famous original in the Louvre, and nobody expected the routine cleaning process to reveal anything worth talking about. Then the black paint started coming off, and underneath it was a landscape. Not just any landscape, but one that matched the background of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa in astonishing detail. And that discovery turned out to be only the beginning. For most of its known history, this painting had a quiet, forgettable existence. It entered the Prado's collection in the early 1800s and stayed there for 2 centuries, largely ignored. Art historians assumed it was simply one of the many copies. Made after Leonardo's masterpiece became famous, painted by an unknown artist who admired the original enough to reproduce it, but without the skill or authenticity to be taken seriously. The model's face looked flatter, the colors were duller, and instead of the atmospheric, hazy landscape everyone associates with the Louvre version, there was only a flat expanse of black behind her. Most experts assumed the artist had either simplified Leonardo's complex background or simply couldn't replicate it. Everything changed when the Prado began preparing for a major exhibition dedicated to Leonardo and his workshop. As part of the routine preparation, restorers decided to carefully remove the black overpaint before putting the piece on display. As the surface was cleaned away layer by layer, cliffs, winding paths, and a distant bridge slowly began to emerge, the same misty, rocky landscape found behind the Mona Lisa in the Louvre. But the real breakthrough came from a more technical form of investigation. Using infrared reflectography, researchers examined the underdrawing beneath the visible paint layer on both works, essentially looking at the sketch marks and early corrections an artist makes before finishing a piece. What they found made the case impossible to dismiss as coincidence. It's well documented that Leonardo constantly revised his compositions as he worked, adjusting the position of the sitter's hands, refining the folds of her clothing, subtly reworking her facial features over time. When researchers compared the underdrawings of the Prado version to the Louvre original, they discovered the exact same sequence of changes on both. Not similar changes made independently by someone copying a finished painting, but the identical corrections made at the same stages as if both artists were adjusting their work in tandem. A simple copyist working from a completed painting would have no way of knowing about changes Leonardo made and then painted over. The only way to explain matching revision histories is if both paintings were created side by side, as the composition itself was still evolving. That conclusion led to a striking theory. The Prado version wasn't a copy at all, in the traditional sense. It was painted inside Leonardo's own workshop, likely by one of his students, working at the same easel setup, watching the master's hand and mirroring his choices in real time. Rather than a copy made after the fact, it functioned more like a twin, developing in parallel with the original masterpiece. And in some ways, that twin has aged far better than its famous sibling. Both paintings are now over 500 years old, but the Prado version has survived in noticeably better condition. Anyone familiar with the Mona Lisa in the Louvre pictures her, with that distinctive greenish-yellow tone, but that coloring isn't how the painting originally looked. Over the centuries, the varnish protecting Leonardo's original has darkened and yellowed with age, subtly altering the way viewers perceive both her skin tone and the surrounding landscape. The Prado version, painted on a high-quality wooden panel and comparatively well-preserved, still holds much of its original color vibrancy. Details that are difficult to make out on the aged Louvre painting today, the sheer veil over her hair, delicate embroidery along her neckline, the translucent drape across one shoulder, remain clearly visible on the Madrid version. In effect, it offers something the original itself no longer can: a fairly accurate window into what Leonardo's masterpiece actually looked like when it was still new. So, who painted it? Since Leonardo ran an active workshop for much of his career, several talented students worked closely alongside him, and two names come up most often as candidates. The first is Francesco Melzi, considered Leonardo's most devoted and capable pupil, who inherited a large portion of his teacher's manuscripts and drawings after his death, and clearly understood his working methods at a deep level. The second is Gian Giacomo Caprotti, better known by his nickname Salai, who spent more than 2 decades at Leonardo's side as an assistant, occasional model, and close companion. Neither theory has ever been definitively confirmed, and it's entirely possible the true answer will never be settled. What is certain is that whoever held that brush was standing close enough to Leonardo to witness the Mona Lisa being invented, brushstroke by brushstroke, in real time. One last question remains, and it's almost as strange as the discovery itself. Why would anyone paint a solid black background over an already finished landscape? Researchers have only been able to date that alteration to sometime in the early 18th century, more than 100 years after the painting was completed, but the specific person or reasoning behind it remains unknown. Strangely enough, that decision may have accidentally protected the painting. Sealing the surface under an opaque layer shielded the original landscape from light exposure, dust, and centuries of well-meaning but often damaging restoration attempts that affected countless other Renaissance works. In trying to alter the painting, whoever added that black paint may have unintentionally preserved it. Today, the Prado Mona Lisa is considered one of the most significant surviving works connected to Leonardo's studio, not because it replaces the original, but because it offers a rare, direct view into how that original actually came to exist. It's a strange kind of irony. For nearly 2 centuries, this was the painting nobody paid attention to, dismissed as a minor, unremarkable copy sitting quietly in storage. And it turned out to be one of the closest surviving witnesses to the creation of the most famous portrait in human history. Do you think the Prado version deserves to be recognized as more than just a copy, or does the Louvre original remain in a category entirely of its own? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.